Good morning. This is lesson 31, and we're talking about imaginary numbers today. All right, so let's get started with the do now. Solving the equation x squared plus 1 equals 0. All right, so in order to get x by itself, f1 from both sides, and we have x squared equals negative 1. In order to get rid of the square to get x by itself, we now have to take the square root of both sides. Now, normally, we tell you that you cannot take the square root of a negative number, but with imaginary numbers, you can. So this radical gets rid of the squared and the radical. So that just leaves us with x. And then we have x equals the square root of negative 1 is this scripted I, which stands for imaginary. Okay, so x equals I. So moving on, and that's always. If there's a negative 1 under a radical, it always equals I. Okay? So moving on, since we cannot solve that equation using real numbers, we're introducing a new number system of imaginary numbers, which use the imaginary unit I. This allows us to further simplify square roots of negative real numbers, right? Which is what we just did in the do now. Okay. So I'm going to do the left 3 questions, and you're going to do the right 3 questions for classwork. Take a picture with your name on it and lesson 3 on the top, uploaded to Classroom. All right, so first question, radical negative 25. So the same way we simplified radicals before is the same way we're going to now. So we have here radical 25, radical negative 1. Just want to make sure this is still going. Okay. So the square root of 25 is 5, and the square root of negative 1 is I. So even though I wrote it kind of separately, the answer is 5I here, okay? So this one, this negative outside of the radical negative 100 is very similar to these two. Are very similar because you have a negative 2, technically there's a negative outside, there's a negative 1. All right, so these are very similar. All right, so we have a negative 1 outside. And then we're going to break down this negative 100 into radical 100, which is a perfect square, and then radical negative 1. Let me make sure this timer is going. Yeah, it is. Awesome. Okay, so the square root of 100 is 10. And then remember, we have to bring down that negative 1, so those will get multiplied. And then the square root of negative 1 is I. So if you multiply that out, you get negative 10I as your final answer. Right here, we have radical 7 and radical negative 1. Radical 7 cannot be broken down, but negative 1 can. All right, so this stays as radical 7, but because this negative 1 can be broken down, we're going to bring that I to the front. All right, so that is not mistaken for being under the radical. So I radical 7. All right, so these 3 U-try questions on the right are for you to do for class. Moving on to the next slide. So now we have operations with imaginary numbers. So we have radical negative 16 plus radical negative 9. All right, so we're going to break each of them down. And radical 16, radical negative 1, keep that plus in mind, radical 9, and radical negative 1. Square root of 16 is 4. Square root of negative 1 is I. Square root of 9 is 3. The root of negative 1 is I. Because these both have i's attached, you can combine them. So 4i plus 3i gives us a 7i. All right, so now I'm going to do b. Same thing, break it down because we already broke these same radicals down. I'm just going to rewrite it. So radical 16, radical negative 1 minus radical 9, radical negative 1. Radical 16 breaks up to 4, negative 1 breaks up to I, minus 3i. So 4i minus 3i is 1i, but you don't need to put the 1, so it's just I. All right. So now I'm going to break this up again. We have multiplication, radical 16, radical negative 1 multiplied by radical 9, radical negative 1, multiplication. This is 4i times 3i, 4i times 3i, 4 times 3 is 12. Now you're going to treat the i's as if they were like variables. So I times I will be I squared. And then here's a fun fact. I squared is the equivalent of negative 1. So 12 times negative 1 is negative 12. Okay. So here, okay, so now this is just a little, I don't want to say like study guide, but just a way for you to remember if you run into any of these. This first 8 set of i's, I to the first, I to the second, to the third, to the fourth, all the way up to I to the 8th, they're all repetitive, right? So anytime you run into any of these imaginary numbers, you'll notice a pattern, all right? So I to the first power is just I squared is negative 1. I to the third is negative I to the fourth is positive 1. I to the fifth is I to the sixth is negative 1. I to the seventh is negative I, and I to the 8th is positive 1. So obviously you guys should notice the pattern, right, between all of these. So there's I here, negative 1, negative 1, negative I, and positive 1, positive 1. So anytime you have something like I to the 82nd power, obviously you don't know what that would be, right? But in this case, you would have to understand that the 82 only has to be broken down by 4s, right? Because anything that's I to the 4th is going to be 1. And 1 times itself will give you the answer that you're looking for, right? So what I mean is that one number under 82, if not 82, goes into 4. So let's do, just in case you didn't know, 82 is not divisible by 4, right? It gives you a decimal. So the number under 82 that is divisible by 4 is 80. So if I broke this down, I to the 80th power times I to the second power, I to the 80th power, 80 is divisible by 4, which means it's really just I to the 4th in this case. Sorry. So this breaks down. When you make the exponent divisible by 4, it becomes 1, because anything that's I to the 4th power is 1. So because 80 can break down by 4s 20 times, that means it would be 1 times 1 times 1 times 1 times 1, 21s, right? So 1 times 1 is itself. Even if I have 21s lined up, multiplied times each other, it would still be 1. So that's why any exponent that's divisible by 4 for an imaginary number, the answer is 1. So now all we have to deal with is this I squared, which we already know looking at our chart. I squared is -1. So 1 times -1 is -1. And that's our final answer. All right, so question 10. I didn't write it, but now that I'm doing it here, I kind of want you to do question 10 on your own because I explained 9. So you're going to find what number under 105, because 105 is not divisible by 4. So the highest number, which I believe I can give it to you actually, make it a little bit easier. So 104. So this breaks down to I to the 104 times I to the first. And the reason why it's I to the first is because when you multiply variables, you add the exponent. 104 plus 1 is 105. All right, so you already know what 104 breaks down to, right? Then tell me what I to the first breaks down to, and then give me a final answer. This question 10 is another U try. Question 11 is also a U try. So in total, you have 5 U tries. You have these 3, and then you have these 2, questions 10 and 11 at the bottom. All right. Thank you guys for listening. Any questions? Please come to the Google Meets video chat today at 3:30 p.m. I will be posting the info for you to join. All right. Stay safe. Yeah.